When the aliens first sent their message of peace, the whole world waited eagerly for their arrival. Months had passed since that day, yet Earth still hadn't seen even a glimpse of their ships. The message had said they would send envoys, peaceful visitors, to meet with humankind, to share knowledge and to learn about each other. But as the expected day came and went, only silence filled the skies. People across the planet gathered to watch the heavens. In every city, large screens displayed live feeds from telescopes pointed toward the stars where the signal had come from. Reporters stood on rooftops with microphones speaking of historic moments and the dawn of galactic friendship. But nothing happened. No ships, no visitors, no lights breaking through the clouds. Just the endless stretch of space staring back. At first, governments told everyone to stay patient. Maybe there had been a delay. Maybe the aliens were being cautious. Maybe, they said, the vast distances between stars had slowed them down. Scientists reassured the public that space travel wasn't like driving a car. It could take time. So humanity waited a little longer. Weeks passed, then months. The world started to lose its excitement. The grand welcoming events that had been planned were quietly canceled. The United Nations Contact Council, formed specifically to handle alien diplomacy, had nothing left to do but hold meetings that ended in frustration. What once felt like the beginning of a new age was now beginning to look like another unsolved mystery. But something strange was happening behind the scenes, something few people knew about. In the early hours of a cold morning, observatories in Chile, Hawaii, and Japan all picked up unusual readings from deep space. It wasn't light or radio, it was distortion, a bending of signals, as if something invisible was moving through the solar system. At first, astronomers thought it was just a system error. But then, the same distortion appeared again, this time much closer, near the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Reports started to reach the higher authorities. Large moving objects were being detected, but they were invisible to most scanners. They didn't reflect light or radar. They didn't match the pattern of any natural object. Something massive and unknown was hiding in the dark. At first, the information was kept secret. Officials didn't want to start panic, especially not after the failed arrival of the so-called peaceful visitors. But secrets never stay hidden for long. Within days, amateur astronomers started to post strange findings online, flickering shadows where none should be, stars briefly disappearing and reappearing. People began to whisper about alien observation crafts, ships cloaked and watching Earth in silence. The public reaction split into two sides. Some believed the aliens were still peaceful, simply studying humanity before making contact. Others believed the opposite, that they were spying, preparing something far more dangerous. Online debates filled every corner of the internet. Talk shows turned into shouting matches between scientists and conspiracy theorists. One night, a global broadcast aired from the International Observatory Council. The speaker, an older scientist with tired eyes, stood before the camera and admitted, "We've detected several objects moving in a pattern that suggests intelligent control. They are large, they are close, and they are not responding to any of our transmissions." The announcement sent a chill through everyone who watched. People who had once dreamed of friendship among the stars now felt fear settle deep in their stomachs. The word peace suddenly sounded uncertain. In the following weeks, governments all over the world quietly went into alert mode. Satellites were repositioned, defense systems powered up, and every radar installation began running non-stop. Still, no one saw the ships directly. They were out there, but hidden, like predators waiting just beyond the light. Then came the first strange malfunction. It started with communication networks. A few satellites lost contact for a few minutes, then reconnected. Engineers brushed it off as interference, but soon the outages grew longer and more frequent. Whole regions lost internet, radio, and power for hours. Military satellites began showing corrupted data, static-filled images, distorted readings, entire sections of Earth's orbit going dark. People thought it was a cyber attack. But deep space monitoring stations knew better. They were picking up small bursts of energy near those same failing satellites, as if something was feeding on their systems or disabling them deliberately. The scientists who had once spent months decoding the aliens' peaceful message now studied those energy patterns in fear. The readings were too precise, too clean to be random. Something intelligent was behind it. Inside underground command centers, Silent discussions took place between the leaders of the world's biggest nations. They compared data, shared recordings, and realized something terrifying. Every satellite that went offline was one connected to defense or surveillance. It wasn't random, it was targeted. While most of humanity continued their daily lives unaware of the growing danger above, those in power began to understand the truth. The peace message had been a distraction. While Earth celebrated, the ones who sent it had already begun moving into position. The first direct evidence came from a mining station near Mars. A small crew reported seeing a shadow move across the stars, vast and silent. Their instruments registered nothing, but then their communications cut out. The station went dark, and no signal ever came back. Earth's telescope scanned the area, but all they found were faint energy trails, like the ripples left by something enormous passing through invisible water. The public wasn't told about the Mars incident, but rumors started spreading anyway. People in high positions leaked small details. Soon, social media was filled with wild stories, some claiming that Earth was already under surveillance, others saying governments were covering up a failed first contact. Among the noise, one truth stood out. The aliens hadn't lied about coming. They were already here. The tension reached its breaking point when several major power plants across the globe suddenly failed. Not just electrical failure, total system collapse. When investigators checked, they found something deeply disturbing. The failure had been triggered from outside the network, not by hackers, not by software, but by signals that originated from orbit. It became impossible to deny it any longer. The alien presence was real. They weren't here for peace, and they had already begun taking control of humanity's sky. Panic spread quietly, then all at once. Markets crashed, people left cities, and strange objects began appearing in the night sky. Massive triangular silhouettes faintly visible when lightning flashed. Ordinary people recorded them on phones, blurry and distant, yet enough to cause fear everywhere. Governments tried to calm the public. Official statements said there was no confirmed threat, but no one believed them anymore. Scientists who once appeared on television to speak about peaceful intentions now avoided the cameras entirely. Something in their eyes said it all. They knew more than they could admit. And then came the final sign. One night, across several observatories, a low-frequency pulse swept through the planet. It wasn't sound, but people felt it, like pressure in their bones, a vibration deep in the air. Instruments recorded it as an energy wave moving from space toward Earth, vanishing into the atmosphere. When decoded, fragments of the old alien message appeared inside the signal but rearranged, distorted. It wasn't the same peaceful greeting. It sounded more like a command, a warning. The scientists tried to analyze it, but before they could even finish, dozens of military communication lines went dead. Then the images began to appear on secret defense screens, strange geometric formations moving beyond the moon, massive enough to block starlight. For the first time, humanity's leaders faced the undeniable truth. The aliens had arrived long ago. They had been studying, watching, disabling Earth's defenses from the shadows. The promised envoys weren't diplomats. They were scouts. And now the rest of their forces were coming. The world that once looked at the stars with hope now looked at them with fear. People who once dreamed of shaking hands with visitors from another world now whispered prayers, hoping those visitors would never land. As silent ships drifted unseen beyond the dark side of the moon, the people of Earth stood on the edge of something they couldn't understand. And though no one yet knew it, somewhere deep beneath the planet's frozen poles, humanity's last and greatest secret was waiting. A secret that would soon rise to meet the shadows. The aliens thought Earth would remain silent forever. Months had passed since the message of peace reached Earth. People had never seen the world so united before. Every news channel talked about the same thing. Every scientist, every government, every family was waiting for one single moment, the day when the visitors would finally arrive. The message had been short and simple, filled with soft, repeating tones that almost sounded like music. After translation, it said, "We come in peace. We bring knowledge. We seek friendship." It was beautiful. People cried when they first heard it. For the first time in generations, there was something that gave the world hope. On rooftops, children pointed at the stars, trying to guess which one the visitors might come from. Schools organized first contact lessons, and artists painted murals of humans shaking hands with shining beings from other worlds. But not everyone felt peace. Some people were cautious. They said the message was too perfect, too easy to trust. If they really wanted friendship, one general said during a world broadcast, why didn't they show themselves? Still, most people refused to believe anything bad. Humanity had always dreamed of life beyond Earth, and now that it was real, they couldn't imagine it being anything but good. As the promised time of arrival came closer, the excitement grew. News agencies around the world covered every detail. Scientists predicted that the alien ships would arrive within one Earth year. That date became a global holiday, Arrival Day. Governments started preparing places to receive the visitors. Massive landing zones were built in deserts and open oceans. Large banners were painted with the words, "Welcome to Earth." Even the poorest nations joined the effort, donating what they could. It was no longer about borders or politics, it was about representing the whole of humanity. And then, the day arrived. Across the world, people gathered outdoors. Giant screens in every city showed live footage of the sky. Observatories tracked the stars, searching for any sign of movement. Children held flags, couples hugged each other, and for once, the whole planet breathed in harmony. But as the hours passed, nothing happened. There were no bright lights in the sky. No ships, no sound. By nightfall, the world fell silent. People waited all through the night, watching and hoping, but the skies remained empty. The next day, scientists came forward, embarrassed but calm. They said the visitors might have been delayed, or maybe they were approaching slowly to avoid frightening humans. The world accepted that explanation at first. Weeks turned into months. Then half a year. Still no sign. The excitement faded into quiet confusion. Then small things started happening. At first, satellites began to flicker. Some stopped working for a few seconds before coming back online. Engineers thought it was solar interference. But then, entire sections of the satellite network went offline without warning. A few nights later, strange lights appeared beyond the moon's orbit. They were faint and moved oddly, like they were alive. Telescopes captured them, blurry shapes moving in perfect formation. They weren't meteors and they weren't human-made. The news spread like wildfire. Some people said the visitors had finally arrived but were staying far away to observe. Others said it was just space debris reflecting light. But those who worked at space command stations knew something wasn't right. They noticed patterns in the signals, movements too organized, too intelligent. A scientist in one of the observatories noticed something chilling. Every time Earth sent a new signal or message into space, one of those faint lights blinked back. Not immediately, but exactly 7 minutes later. Always 7 minutes. It was like something was answering every call. Governments quietly sent warnings to each other, but they didn't tell the public. They didn't want to cause panic. Meanwhile, life on Earth went on as normal. People grew used to the idea that maybe the visitors weren't coming after all. Some even joked about it online. Maybe they got lost, people laughed. Maybe they found someone better to visit. But in the command centers hidden under the surface, the tone was far from funny. One night, an engineer noticed a power fluctuation. It wasn't big, but it was unusual. Power grids across multiple continents flickered at the exact same second. It was impossible for that to happen naturally. Then the data systems connected to communication satellites began receiving packets of unknown code. Strange signals that didn't match any human language. They called it the whisper code. At first, they thought it was random interference. But when linguists analyzed it, they found something disturbing. The code wasn't random, it was mapping. It was tracing locations. Every transmission seemed to record human infrastructure, power plants, defense systems, command networks. Someone or something was watching Earth in silence, mapping everything. By the time people realized it, it was too late. One early morning, long before sunrise, astronomers detected a distortion near the asteroid belt. Space itself looked like it was folding inward, like heat rising from a desert road. The first readings made no sense. The energy level was higher than anything ever recorded. The world's telescopes turned toward that part of space. Everyone expected to see ships maybe bright and beautiful like the ones in movies. Instead, they saw nothing, just darkness. But then shadows began to move. Something massive, several kilometers long, passed between the stars, blocking the light. It moved silently, invisible to most sensors but not to human eyes. Panic spread in every control room. The same scientist who had once translated the alien message now looked pale and terrified. The aliens hadn't come with words of peace anymore. They had been here all along, hiding, watching, preparing. For months, the world had been sending open messages, telling the visitors everything about Earth, its languages, cultures, and even its defenses. What was meant as an act of friendship had become a gift of information to their enemy. And then, one night, the whispers stopped. All communication fell silent. In orbit, the space stations went offline one by one. The last transmission from one of them was only 3 words long. They are here. After that, nothing. On Earth, skies were calm. Birds still flew. Waves still touched the shore. But above that calm, in the cold vacuum of space, something enormous was moving. Military radars detected dozens of shapes surrounding the planet. Unseen, silent, hidden by advanced cloaking technology. They weren't sending greetings this time. They were waiting. Earth had never felt so small, so helpless. The world that once dreamed of friendship among the stars now faced the realization that maybe peace had only been a mask. And yet, deep underground, far below mountains and ice, there were places where people still worked in secret. Projects that had begun long before the message of peace. Projects hidden from the public, guarded by silence. They were building something not meant to welcome visitors, but to survive them. While the world looked up in hope, these hidden teams prepared for the possibility no one wanted to believe, that one day, Earth might have to fight for its very existence, and that day was coming faster than anyone expected. In the final days before the first strike, the skies turned strange. Stars disappeared behind invisible shadows. The moon's surface reflected sudden flashes that no telescope could explain. Animals grew restless. Communication lines buzzed with faint, eerie signals. Then one quiet evening, every screen on Earth lit up at once. It wasn't human programming, it was something else. The same voice that once said, "We come in peace," now repeated one final line. This time in every language known to humanity, "You are not what we hoped for." And with that, the message cut out. That night, the sky itself changed. People stepped outside to see strange patterns of light across the horizon. Soft at first, then growing brighter. For a few seconds it looked beautiful, like an aurora. Then power went out across entire cities. Earth realized in that moment that peace was over. The visitors had arrived. But not as friends, not as teachers. They had come to claim. And humanity, caught between disbelief and fear, would soon face the truth. Words of peace had only been the first move in a far greater game. The silence didn't last long. Within days, everything began to fall apart. At first, it was small things. Tiny flickers of power, short waves of static in the air, radio channels cutting off mid-broadcast. But then the interruptions grew longer, stronger, and stranger. Entire regions lost all satellite contact. The night skies began to glow faintly in odd colors. Green, red, and sometimes a deep blue haze that no one could explain. Scientists said it was ion interference, but everyone knew better. It was them, the ones who had promised peace. People were afraid to admit it out loud, but deep down everyone knew the truth. The aliens had never left. They had been hiding, studying, and preparing. The peace message was only a mask to make humanity lower its guard. In a small control room under a mountain base, engineers stared at flickering screens showing the orbital network collapsing one system at a time. "It's like someone's cutting our eyes out," one of them said quietly. The room was filled with the sound of alarms and crackling voices from radios that barely worked anymore. Each report was worse than the last. Communication satellites lost, power grids disabled, entire defense systems locked out by invisible code. The strange part was how clean it all looked. There was no explosion, no visible attack, just quiet failure, like someone had reached into the heart of every machine and turned it off. Soon the air traffic system started to fail. Passenger planes were grounded worldwide. Space stations went into lockdown. No one knew where the invisible enemy was, or how far their control had spread. But everyone knew something terrible was about to happen. Then it did. Without warning, a brilliant flash filled the sky above the Pacific Ocean. It wasn't lightning, and it wasn't a weapon anyone recognized. For a few seconds, night turned into day. When the light faded, Every satellite over that part of the planet was gone, vanished from existence. Moments later, the feed from a defense satellite caught a glimpse of something moving, large, angular, and glowing faintly with blue light. It disappeared before they could focus. That was the moment the leaders of Earth finally realized the truth. This wasn't an accident, and it wasn't observation. It was the beginning of an invasion. The world's governments tried to hide it, but fear travels faster than secrets. Leaked footage began spreading across the internet. Grainy videos of massive dark shapes moving above the clouds. They looked like floating mountains made of metal, silent but alive. Some people said they were alien ships. Others said they were illusions. But the next event left no room for doubt. In the middle of the night, the first direct strike happened. A defense satellite orbiting Earth detected an unknown beam of energy descending toward one of the orbital stations. In less than a second, the entire station was gone. No explosion, no debris, just gone. Thousands watched the live feed before it cut out. It became the most replayed footage in human history. The panic that followed was unstoppable. Air raid sirens wailed across cities. Military bases went into full lockdown. People rushed to shelters, unsure what to protect themselves from. The world's leaders gathered in emergency councils underground, trying to find words to calm billions of terrified people. But how could anyone calm a planet that was being watched by ghosts in the sky? For a brief moment, humanity's pride broke. The dream of peaceful contact shattered completely. Everyone remembered the message that had started it all. We come in peace. Now those same words felt like mockery. A quiet rage began to grow, not just among soldiers, but among ordinary people. Humanity wasn't perfect, but it had survived everything thrown at it. Wars, disasters, diseases, even near extinction. And now, strangers from the stars thought they could end it in silence? That thought alone made people's fear slowly turn into anger. In one of the last surviving orbital control rooms, scientists worked day and night trying to trace where the attacks were coming from. "They're using our satellites against us," one of them said, watching as alien signals piggybacked on Earth's own systems. "They're inside everything." Still, they refused to stop trying. Messages were sent to every surviving base, every hidden outpost, every underground network. "Prepare. They are coming." And then came the worst moment of all. Over the Indian Ocean, hundreds of witnesses saw a huge shape emerge from behind the clouds. It was darker than night, blocking out stars as it moved. A commercial ship passing below captured footage before it was lost. The object was enormous, triangular, with glowing veins running along its surface like molten metal. It hovered for a few seconds, then released smaller objects that shot downward, leaving trails of white fire. Moments later, explosions rippled across nearby waters. The waves reached coastal towns within minutes. That was humanity's first real look at the enemy. Every major military force tried to respond. Fighter jets scrambled into the air, missiles launched, drones deployed, but nothing worked. The alien ships didn't even move to dodge. Their shields shimmered faintly, and every missile disintegrated before reaching them. It was like trying to fight a thunderstorm with stones. Still, humanity didn't stop. Across every nation, defense forces worked together for the first time in history. They shared information, technology, and strategy. For once, there were no borders. Only one species trying to survive. As chaos spread, a strange calm settled in the command centers of the world. Everyone knew the odds were impossible, but there was something about facing extinction that brought out the best in humans. They refused to bow. While the surface of Earth burned in scattered battles, something else was happening deep below. In secret underground chambers, old programs long buried were being reactivated. One of those programs had been whispered about for decades, a project that didn't officially exist. It had no name in public records, only a code name passed between generals, Titan class. Even as governments tried to maintain control, a quiet group of engineers, scientists, and strategists were preparing something enormous beneath Antarctica's ice. They had built machines so large that even the oceans could not hide them, machines that could turn the tide if given the chance. But to activate them too early would risk total failure, so while the aliens struck from above, humanity waited, gathering what little strength it had left. Around the world, people took shelter in subway tunnels, caves, and old bunkers. Families huddled together, praying for safety. The skies above them shimmered with strange lights, sometimes showing silhouettes of ships so big they seemed to cover entire cities. News reports still tried to sound calm, but everyone could see the fear behind the presenters' eyes. "Stay indoors," they repeated. "Help is coming." but no one knew from where. Then unexpectedly the attack stopped. For an entire day there were no new strikes. The skies were quiet. The ships that had been seen above cities vanished as suddenly as they had appeared. It was as if the invaders had paused, waiting. In that eerie stillness, humans everywhere felt something shift. Fear was still there, but it was mixed with determination. They had seen the worst. And yet they were still here, still breathing, still fighting to survive. In a dimly lit control room, a single message blinked on an encrypted channel. Phase 2 initiated. Prepare for counterstrike. No one knew where it came from. But deep within the underground facilities beneath the ice, a low hum began to rise. The walls trembled slightly as buried engines came to life for the first time in years. Frozen steel started to move. Massive shapes hidden in the shadows began to awaken, covered in frost and dust. Giant machines built for one purpose only. Above the surface, the alien fleet regrouped, unaware of what humanity was preparing below. They thought Earth's silence meant surrender. They thought the battle was already won. They had no idea that the true storm hadn't even begun. As the sun rose over a quiet and battered world, the people of Earth watched the empty sky, holding on to one final belief, that somewhere, somehow, humanity still had a chance. And in the darkness below, that chance was waking up. The silence before the storm was worse than the attack itself. For a short time, the world felt frozen. The skies were empty, cities quiet, and communication lines half dead. Humanity didn't know whether the enemy had truly left, or if they were simply waiting for the final strike. But deep beneath the Earth, inside cold steel chambers buried under the Antarctic ice, there was movement. Massive doors sealed for decades began to tremble. Dust fell from the ceiling. Hidden lights flickered on for the first time in years. What had been forgotten by most of the world was waking up again. The project had been a secret for generations, born in the darkest years when humanity feared it might one day face extinction. It had been called many names: the Shield of Earth, Project Horizon, Titan-class initiative. But everyone who worked on it simply called it the Titans. They were not ordinary machines. They were colossal ships, war vessels larger than mountains, forged from experimental alloys and powered by artificial stars. They were built not for attack but for survival, meant to defend the planet if humanity ever faced a threat beyond imagination. For years, they had remained hidden, silent beneath ice and rock. No one ever expected to need them. Until now. In one of the underground control rooms, engineers and soldiers stood before flickering monitors. The air was filled with the low hum of generators. Power levels rising, someone said quietly. Engines charging. Systems waking up. On one screen, the outline of the first Titan became clear. Its body stretched longer than any skyscraper, covered in layers of black armor that shimmered like glass. Its name was Sol's Wrath. Built to hold the energy of a captured sun fragment, it was humanity's last hope. Above the surface, the world had no idea what was happening. The alien ships had disappeared behind the moon, their signals faint but still there, watching. Many thought the war was already lost. News anchors spoke softly now, voices shaking as they reported broken pieces of information. People stayed indoors whispering prayers or simply staring at the skies, waiting for something, anything to change. Then, the Earth itself began to rumble. It started as a low vibration, felt across the frozen plains of Antarctica. Ice cracked and shattered like glass. Snow whipped into spirals as the ground lifted. Out of the frozen wasteland, enormous plates of steel began to rise. Steam hissed. Lightning flickered across the sky. And then, with a roar that echoed across continents, the first Titan emerged. Sol's Wrath rose slowly, its hull glistening under the dim light of the southern sun. It was like watching a planet give birth to another planet. Something too large, too powerful to exist, yet there it was, alive and moving. As it climbed into the air, its shadow stretched for miles. The alien observers beyond the moon noticed immediately. Their sensors lit up with readings they had never seen before. Something was awakening on Earth, something vast and dangerous. Within minutes, alien fleets began to move again, their ships forming dark clusters that blocked out distant stars. Their communication channels buzzed with unknown codes, preparing for a new strike. On Earth, Sol's Wrath broke free from the last layer of ice and lifted into the sky. The sound it made wasn't like thunder. It was deeper, like the Earth itself was breathing. As it ascended, clouds swirled around it, and people thousands of miles away looked up, seeing a dark mass drifting high above the atmosphere. No one outside the project truly understood what they were seeing. Some thought it was a meteor. Others believed it was an alien craft. But those who knew smiled for the first time in months. Humanity had just answered. Inside the Titan, hundreds of operators worked in silence. Every move had to be perfect. Every second counted. The ship's heart, a small artificial sun, glowed behind reinforced glass, pulsing with raw energy. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. As it reached orbit, Earth's night side lit up with the reflection of its thrusters. The alien fleet had already begun to descend. Massive warships formed a dark wall in space, advancing toward the moon and Earth beyond it. And then, for the first time since the peace message had arrived, Earth spoke back, not in words but in action. The Titan's main energy beam came to life, gathering power so intense that the air around it shimmered like liquid light. For a moment, the whole planet seemed to hold its breath. Then the beam fired. A single pulse of white energy shot across space faster than anything built before. It struck the first alien ship and tore through it like paper. There was no explosion, just silence. And then the enemy vessel shattered into glowing fragments that scattered into the void. People watching from ground-based telescopes couldn't believe their eyes. The invincible invaders, the same ones who had destroyed satellites and wiped out entire stations, were suddenly vulnerable. The alien fleet hesitated. Their formation shifted. For the first time, they were unsure. They had studied humans for years, seen their weapons, their technology, their fear, but they had never seen this. One of the alien ships launched an energy strike toward the Titan. It glowed blue and bright, cutting through the darkness of space. But before it could reach its target, Sul's wrath shield flared, bending the beam and scattering it like dust. Then, the Titan responded with another shot, even stronger than before. Within minutes, the space above Earth turned into a battlefield. Light filled the void. Every flash was a clash of two worlds, one ancient and advanced, the other fierce and desperate. But humanity fought with something the invaders didn't understand: resolve. On the ground, people gathered outside shelters, staring at the glowing horizon. Some cried, others cheered, though most simply stood in silence. They didn't know what was happening, but they could feel it. The tide was turning. The alien ships began to retreat toward the moon, regrouping, but the Titans were no longer just one. Deep beneath the oceans and deserts, more awakening codes were transmitted. Across the planet, hidden chambers opened. Massive silhouettes began to rise from under the sea and through mountain caverns. Each Titan had a name: Iron Dawn, Echo of Terra, Silent Horizon, Saul's Wrath. Together, they were more than weapons. They were Earth's voice of survival. When the alien fleet tried one last desperate move, launching hundreds of smaller craft to swarm the Titans, something remarkable happened. The Titans moved together, forming a defensive barrier. Energy fields linked between them like webs of light, shielding the planet below. The sky lit up brighter than dawn. Every strike from the enemy failed. Every counterattack from the Titans cut through the dark. Then, one by one, the alien ships began to vanish. Not through retreat, but through destruction. The Titans' combined energy sent shockwaves across space, scattering what was left of the invaders' fleet. For the first time since the invasion began, Earth was safe, at least for now. When the final explosion faded and silence returned to space, Saul's Wrath floated motionless, its energy core still glowing faintly. Inside, the crew sat in stunned quiet. They had done the impossible. Back on Earth, people emerged from underground shelters looking up at the stars. Some whispered, "We're still here." Others simply smiled, exhausted but alive. Far beyond the moon, the remnants of the alien fleet sent one last transmission back to their command world. The message was simple: Earth is not defenseless. They have Titans. And in that distant part of the galaxy where the invaders' home suns burned bright, silence followed. The kind of silence that meant fear. Humanity had survived the first war of the stars. But everyone knew it wasn't over. The Titans had awakened, and now the universe would never see Earth the same way again. The battle above Earth had ended, but the silence that followed felt heavy. The stars looked peaceful again, yet everyone knew it was not over. Pieces of destroyed alien ships floated through the blackness, glowing faintly like dying embers. Humanity had won its first real victory, but at a terrible cost. Across Earth, cities still lay in ruins. Communication lines were broken and millions of people were displaced. But none of that mattered for a short while. When people looked up and saw the massive shape of Sol's wrath hovering high above, a strange feeling spread through the world. Hope. For the first time, humanity had looked into the darkness of space and refused to back down. The news traveled fast, even without working networks. Word spread through old radios, handwritten notes, and spoken messages passed from one survivor to another. "We fought back," they said. "We're not finished." In underground shelters, people lit candles and whispered to each other about the Titans. Some called them angels, others called them monsters of steel. But one thing everyone agreed on: they were the reason humanity still existed. Inside the control deck of Sol's wrath, the air was tense but calm. The operators worked in silence, checking systems, running repairs. Every sensor pointed outward, scanning the empty dark where the enemy fleet had disappeared. They knew it was only a matter of time before the aliens regrouped. And when they did, it wouldn't be another small fleet. The next time, they would come in full force. Far beyond the moon, deep in uncharted regions of space, the surviving alien commanders were already preparing. Their home systems were in shock. They had never imagined a species like humans, primitive by their standards, could build something powerful enough to destroy their armadas. But what frightened them most wasn't the weapon itself. It was what it meant. Humanity had built Titans not for conquest, but for defense. They had been preparing for something like this long before the aliens even noticed them. The aliens believed they were the only ones capable of controlling the stars. Now they realized they were wrong. On Earth, the Titans continued to wake. Massive vibrations shook the oceans as two more emerged from beneath the waves. One rose through the Pacific, scattering entire currents as it broke the surface. Another ascended from the Sahara Desert, its hull glowing under the burning sun. People around the world watched from far below as these giant silhouettes joined Sol's wrath in orbit. For the first time in human history, Earth had its own armada in the sky. The surviving governments met again through secure channels, their faces weary but determined. The decision was clear. They couldn't wait for another invasion. They had to take the fight beyond Earth. The aliens had attacked without warning, without mercy. If humanity didn't act now, they would return stronger. The plan was dangerous, almost impossible, but it was the only way. The Titans would travel beyond Earth's system, track the invaders' main fleet, and stop them before they reached home. It wasn't revenge, it was survival. Preparation began immediately. The ships were armed, recharged, and loaded with supplies. Thousands of volunteers came forward. Pilots, engineers, scientists, willing to leave everything behind for one purpose: to protect their planet. Families gathered at launch sites, watching as the enormous machines lit the skies. There were tears, prayers, and silence. Everyone knew many of those who left might never return. When the Titans finally rose into deep space, the world stood still. Their massive shadows passed over continents like moving eclipses. Even the oceans seemed to quiet down, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. In orbit, the ships aligned into formation, their engines glowing like tiny suns. One by one, their jump drives activated, bending the space around them. Within seconds, they vanished, leaving behind streaks of light that faded slowly into the void. Humanity's greatest warriors were now gone, heading into the unknown. Inside the lead Titan, Sol's wrath, the view outside the window was breathtaking. Stars stretched endlessly in every direction, and the faint blue dot of Earth grew smaller behind them. The silence of space was overwhelming, yet inside everyone moved with purpose. They weren't running, they were hunting. For days they traveled through the dark, following the energy trails left by the alien fleet. The readings led them to a distant star system, a place no human had ever seen. The closer they got, the more readings appeared on their screens. Hundreds of ships, thousands even, orbiting a series of massive stations. The alien home system wasn't what they expected. It was ancient, built around two suns with rings of metal structures glowing with artificial light. The fleet that had attacked Earth was just one of many. Dozens more waited there, forming what looked like a floating city of war. The humans inside the Titans exchanged silent glances. The odds were impossible, but retreat wasn't an option. If they didn't strike now, those ships would soon come for Earth again. The Titans slowed. hiding behind a large gas giant to avoid detection. For several hours they observed quietly, gathering data. Every movement of the enemy fleet was recorded. Every signal was traced. Finally, the command signal came through. A single phrase repeated across all comms. For Earth, for survival. The Titans broke from cover. The first shot came from Sol's Wrath, cutting across space like lightning. It hit one of the alien command stations directly, splitting it apart in a blinding explosion. Within seconds, alarms echoed through the alien system. Their fleet scrambled, trying to react, but it was too late. The Titans moved together like predators in perfect coordination. Energy beams and plasma storms filled the void, painting the darkness in white and gold. Entire alien cruisers disintegrated before they could even target the ships. The humans inside worked with calm focus, no celebration, no hesitation. Every move was calculated, every shot precise. The aliens fought back fiercely, launching waves of drones and high-energy weapons. But the Titan's shields absorbed the damage like sunlight on metal. One alien flagship tried to ram Iron Dawn, but the Titan simply shifted position and unleashed a pulse that shattered it into fragments. Across the battlefield, the war raged in silence. There was no sound in space, only flashes of light and the silent movement of giants. From far away, it looked almost beautiful, like a storm of stars being born. The aliens, once so confident in their superiority, now fought in panic. Their commanders tried to coordinate an escape, but the Titans were faster and stronger. For every human ship damaged, 10 alien vessels vanished. And then came the moment no one expected. The Titan Echo of Terra locked onto the alien central communication hub, the very structure that had sent the peace message to Earth months earlier. The ship's crew hesitated for a moment, remembering how it all began. That message had promised friendship. It had fooled billions. It had started everything. Now humanity would end it. The beam fired, brighter than any star in sight. When it hit, the alien signal tower collapsed, sending waves of energy through the entire system. Every alien ship went silent at once. Their communications failed. Their formations fell apart. In the control room of Sol's Wrath, the main screen filled with light as the explosion spread. It wasn't just victory, it was freedom. Humanity had finally taken control of its own destiny. The battle ended as suddenly as it began. The Titans drifted among the remains of the alien armada, surrounded by glowing debris. The two suns of the alien system burned quietly, unaware that their empire had fallen. Inside the ships there were no cheers. Just quiet relief, deep breaths, and the realization of what they had done. They had destroyed an empire that once ruled countless worlds. But they hadn't done it out of hate. They had done it to survive. As the Titans prepared to return home, a strange calm filled the space around them. Humanity had sent a message far louder than any transmission could carry. We will not be conquered. When the fleet turned toward Earth, their engines burned brighter than ever. From afar, the sight looked like a constellation moving together, a new kind of light in the galaxy. The war was not just about weapons or strength. It was about will. The aliens had underestimated the one thing that made humans unstoppable, their determination to protect what they love. And now, somewhere far across the galaxy, alien worlds whispered the same words over and over, words that would echo through generations. Do not provoke Earth. The Titans returned home after months of silence. From the moment their engines reignited in deep space, every radar on Earth came alive. Across the planet, people stopped what they were doing. Construction workers, farmers, children in ruined playgrounds, survivors in camps, they all looked up. For days, the skies had been empty. Now, glowing streaks of light descended slowly, painting the horizon with hope. The first Titan entered orbit quietly, followed by the rest. Their once shining hulls were now scarred with deep burns and broken plates. But they were alive. They had returned. Humanity had survived something no one in the universe thought possible. Every nation, every settlement, and every human heart shared the same feeling, relief mixed with pride. For generations, people had dreamed of reaching the stars. They never expected that reaching them would mean defending their own existence. The world below had changed. What used to be busy cities were now quiet landscapes of rebuilding. People no longer talked about countries or borders, they talked about Earth. The word carried new meaning now. It was not just a planet. It was home. It was everything they had fought for. Inside Sol's Wrath, the crew gathered in the observation deck. The ship's lights were dim, and the huge windows revealed Earth glowing like a blue jewel in the dark. No one spoke for a while. The silence was warm, peaceful, and full of memory. They had seen things that would never fit into any report or history book. They had watched entire fleets vanish, worlds burn, and hope survive. The captain, his face tired and lined with exhaustion, finally broke the silence. "We made it back," he said softly. "Against everything." The others nodded. Some smiled faintly. Others looked down, remembering those who hadn't returned. Back on the surface, celebrations began slowly. There were no parades, no music, no fireworks, just people standing under the open sky whispering thanks. For many, it was the first night they could sleep without fear of an attack from the stars. The next morning, the world's leaders met once again. This time, they didn't sit in separate rooms. They gathered together in one great hall, built near what was once the old United Nations site. The structure was simple, steel and glass surrounded by trees and flowers that had grown wild during the war. The meeting began not with speeches, but with silence. Each leader looked at the others, realizing how meaningless their old rivalries had been. Humanity had faced extinction together, and that had changed everything. One of them stood and said, "We can't go back to how things were. We saw what's out there. We can't afford to be divided again." And just like that, the old world ended and a new one began. They decided to form something greater, a council for all humanity. Not a government, not an empire, but a promise. A promise that no matter what happened, they would stand as one. The Titans would remain orbiting Earth, not as weapons of fear, but as guardians. They would represent not power, but unity. Scientists, engineers, and builders returned to their work. The Titans were repaired and studied. Their technology, once secret, was now shared freely. Humanity began to understand what they had created. It wasn't just metal and energy. It was a symbol of what people could do when they believed in something beyond themselves. For the first time, humanity looked at the stars not with fear but with curiosity again. In the years that followed, space stations were rebuilt, new colonies were planned, and the first civilian ships began to travel to nearby moons. The scars of war slowly healed, but the memory of it never faded. Sometimes on quiet nights, people still looked up and remembered the dark days when the sky was filled with fire. They told stories to their children about how the aliens came, how humanity stood together, and how the Titans saved them all. The children would listen with wide eyes, asking the same question every time: will they ever come back? No one could answer that for sure. But deep down, everyone knew that if they did, Earth would be ready. Far across the galaxy, in the ruins of the alien empire, something stirred. Broken signals flickered among the debris, faint echoes of systems that refused to die. Some of their survivors had escaped, hidden in distant sectors, their once proud civilization reduced to whispers. They spoke of Earth in hushed tones. The stories changed with every retelling. Some said humans were demons wrapped in metal. Others said they were gods. But all agreed on one thing: humanity was not to be provoked again. They called Earth by a new name in their language, the Silent Sun. A world that had once been ignored, now feared across the stars. Back home, humanity didn't know these stories, but they could feel their weight. Something inside them had changed forever. The universe no longer felt infinite. It felt reachable, alive, waiting. Years later, when the world had healed enough, the Human Council launched a new project, the Beacon Initiative. Instead of warships, they built ships meant for peace. Explorers, scientists, diplomats. Their mission was not to fight, but to seek to understand, and to show that even after all the destruction, humanity still believed in connection. The first beacon ship was launched from the same site where Sol's Wrath had been built. It was smaller, graceful, and carried a simple message encoded in hundreds of languages. We remember. We survived. We seek peace, but we are not afraid. As it rose through the atmosphere, thousands gathered to watch. Among them were veterans, engineers, and ordinary people who had lived through the dark years. Some cried quietly. Others smiled through their tears. The ship disappeared into the sky, heading toward the stars humanity had once feared. In orbit, the Titans still floated, silent and watching. They didn't move much anymore, but their presence was enough to keep the peace. They had become monuments of what Earth once endured. Occasionally, maintenance crews visited them. They'd walk through the empty corridors, feeling the weight of history around them. On the walls, some had left messages scratched into the metal, small notes from the past, for home, for those who didn't make it. We came back, one day, when a group of students visited the Titan museums. A young boy asked a simple question. Why did they build something so big, so powerful? His teacher smiled softly and said, because they were scared. But instead of giving up, they built something that made them brave. That was the legacy of the Titans, not destruction, but courage. Decades passed. New generations were born who had never seen war, only peace. But the lessons remained in every story, every monument, every starship that left Earth. Humanity had learned that power alone meant nothing. It was how that power was used that defined them. And though the aliens never returned, strange signals occasionally reached Earth from deep space. Sometimes they were just static. Other times, faint messages no one could decode. The scientist would listen carefully, wondering if it was someone out there, someone watching, or maybe even apologizing. But humanity didn't wait in fear anymore. They continued to explore, to build, and to dream. They sent ships farther than ever before, beyond known systems, to the edge of the galaxy and beyond. And every time they launched a new vessel, they looked back one last time at their blue planet, whispering the same quiet promise that had guided them since the war. No matter how far we go, we never forget where we came from. In the endless night of space, Earth shone brighter than ever. It was no longer just a planet, it was a symbol of resilience, unity, and the strength of life itself. And somewhere, in the darkness beyond the stars, the echoes of humanity's defiance still traveled, soft but unending, carried by the light of a world that refused to be forgotten. Humanity had once been seen as weak. Now they were the light that even the oldest civilizations whispered about. The Titans slept in silence above their home. But their story was far from over. Because every ending in the stars is also a beginning. And for humanity, the children of Earth, the stars were no longer a warning. They were a promise.